Welcome back to Above the Noise. It's my great privilege today to have a friend, Jeff Reynolds, and we're just going to be having a conversation about his life and about where he's been, where God has taken him, what he's doing now, the exciting things that he's doing. I'm sure that you're going to enjoy hearing from him as much as I'm looking forward to this conversation. So welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thank you, Grantland.
Let's begin, Jeff, by telling our audience about you. Introduce yourself, your family, where you live, what you do, anything you think that would introduce you to our audience.
Certainly, yeah. So my name is Jeff Reynolds. I graduated from culinary school back in 1998 and been in the food and beverage industry ever since. Currently working through a ministry call and course of study toward ordination. And I live in Kent, Washington, or Des Moines, Washington, I should say, more appropriately. I've got a wife and a son and cats, dog, that kind of stuff. I grew up in Washington. I was originally born in California, but I was less than a year old when we moved up here. My wife is born and raised in Seattle, Washington, and loves to remind me that I am a California transplant. Um,
Yeah, that's a
uh,
big thing up here.
it is. It's a funny thing that happens, but yeah, she loves to point that out once in a while, just to razz me. So, but yeah, that's kind of, I grew up in Washington and still here.
Well, that's a good introduction to our audience. And we're going to get into more of your history and things that you do. You said you went to culinary school. Tell us a little bit about that part of your life.
So yeah, I would say post high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do in life. I played football, American football, all through junior high and high school. And that's really like kind of like what my life was at that time. And I didn't know what else to do besides I wanted to keep playing ball. And so I went to Walla Walla Community College on the eastern side of the state. It was a good experience, but I realized like 6 months in that this isn't where I wanted to be and came back home. It was a couple of years before I ended up going to culinary school. At that time in my life, I was in my late teens. Life became about the party. That caught up with me heavily at that time, and I needed a space to try and figure out how to get back from that. And through grace and some doors opening in culinary school, I have a passion for cooking. I was probably second grade to summer school. I'm dyslexic, and so I went to summer school in elementary, and you got to take a scholastic and an elective. And the elective I took was a cooking class because my mom's had me in the kitchen since I was a little kid. And so I was like, oh, I like to cook. I'll do that. And that was like the beginning of that journey. I took cooking classes through elementary school, junior high, high school, ultimately graduated from culinary school. So it's just something that, there's those things that you have in your life that you can just do and they help you relax and you don't have to think about them. Cooking has been one of those things for me for a long time where I can just walk into the kitchen. I'm comfortable. I know what to do and how to do it. There's also the artistic side. I took plenty of sculpting and painting and art stuff in school and the realities of culinary arts and the refinement that came with that and the focus that it brought. So it just became something that really helped form me as a young person and ultimately led to where I am today.
So, when you went to put culinary school, did you have a particular area you wanted to focus in, or you just wanted to learn everything the best you can?
At the time, it was really about just learning the best I could of everything, techniques, ingredients, all that kind of stuff. So it was really that focus. In culinary school, I realized my understanding in baking and pastry specifically, instead of strengthening what I already knew, cooking on the line, I actually went into baking and pastry. I am still not a great baker, but I do understand the principles and the foundations of that world a lot better than I did before. So it helped me round out as a better chef.
Well, if you ever want to practice on your baking and pastry and you need a quality control person, just give me a call. Be happy to come and help you improve your skills.
Sure, we can make some stuff.
You you also said that the partying became a part of your life. Was that mixed up with culinary school or after culinary school? Let's talk a little bit about the partying part.
I have two older brothers, and so growing up, both of them went that direction during high school. And so, like, honestly, the first time I ever smoked marijuana, I was in seventh grade.
Mm.
Not like 12. That's not a great place for a young person to be. But my
Mm.
older brothers thought it was funny. And, and me and my little skater buddies in junior high. And that just kind of was the beginning of that life. Yeah, I grew up in the church. I mean, I was, I am dedicated and baptized and married in the Nazarene church, which is funny. But the reality was that wasn't the focus. That was just like, that was my parents' religion, not mine at the time. And so life was about what was happening with my friends and things and stuff like that. So by the time I was a senior in high school, you could say I was a full-blown stoner. And that's when, going to play football, same, just kept going, came back from that experience. And at this point, we're all out of high school. And my friends, while I was in college in Walla Walla, were continuing to ramp up. And so when I got back, things were a lot heavier and deeper than they were when we were younger. And I found myself heavily into a fairly bad space when I was around 19. Me and one of my best friends since junior high, growing up together, at this point, we were injecting methamphetamines into our veins. And I knew it was a while, not a full year, but there was a while into this life where I was like, this is bad. This is really bad. And I'm going to die. Times I should have. And by the grace of God, didn't. And so that was kind of me needing to get my life together. I was going back to church, and going to culinary school, and getting that under wraps. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in between there. Post culinary school, ended up joining a band, and the same life came right back. Again, I
Yeah, I
didn't
was going to
have
ask
a
you about that, the
foundation,
music
so
part of your life. Tell us a little bit about the band life, the road life, plumbing
yeah,
it
yeah.
out.
I was 15 years old when I first band I was ever in. It was actually a bunch of buddies from youth group at church. We were, this is like the 90s grunge era, so we were just kind of a noisy bunch of kids getting in trouble for jamming in the youth room, stuff like that. So then I ended up in another band my senior year in high school, and then ultimately the band that I played in for over a decade was a band called Killing Roots. I met my bass player at a pizza restaurant. This is after culinary school, and I was working. We met at a pizza restaurant and bonded, and the band that I was in at that time was breaking up. They needed a singer. So we started hanging out, and the drummer, he is still one of my best friends to this day. His daughter is my goddaughter. And so that just formulated that relationship at that time, and it kindred. And we played for over a decade. We didn't really tour too much. We played up and down the I-5, if you will, through Washington. But we got to a place where we were signed by an independent label, put out a full-length album. We were opening for a lot of nationally touring acts that were coming through town. We were writing what we called second album material. It was very much a moment where we thought this was actually probably going to happen. And then unfortunately, because of the lifestyle that we lived in, my bass player that I originally met, thank God he's sober now, but also found himself in a deep place with meth and needles. And it was not a good thing. And ultimately, we had to ask him to leave the band because we knew it wasn't healthy for the rest of us, and we wanted to keep pursuing. Unfortunately, it was hard to get the wheels back on the bus with different bass players after playing together for a decade. And at that time, life was happening. I was getting married. My buddies were having kids, and it just kind of pittered out at the
Yeah, like
end.
most bands, right? Eventually they peter out. Many bands, you have your life cycle like everything else, and people's lives go on. And if you're not willing to make a commitment to that, then it will peter out.
Yeah.
Tell us about your conversion experience, about your faith journey.
Yeah, so like I said, I did grow up in the church, so there's always been a foundation of understanding. But the reality of like, when did it penetrate my heart and make that change? It was really COVID. It really was. There was a moment, it was this thing that just happened, and nobody knew what was going on. And at this time, we didn't know if it was, how to get it, what was happening. I remember I was pumping gas and reaching into the little thing to pull my debit card back out and thinking to myself, should I have even touched this thing?
Hmm.
Like rubbing sanitizer on my hands. And I remember I got home, and I'm just, my wife Lori hadn't gotten home yet. So I was at home just dwelling on all of this stuff, and I got the news on. I was a news junkie at that time. Like, my morning routine was to get up, get a cup of coffee, flip on the local news, and then I would spend an hour throughout the morning just like, getting all those stories filled in. And so that at that time, it's all that going on. And so she came home and was like, and I'm clearly distraught. She's like, "Are you okay?" And the exact words were, no, I'm not okay. I'm not effing okay. And I'm in tears, and she's just like, what is happening? She made me sit down. We started talking over stuff. And this is before even her, she did not grow up in the church. And so there's this moment that we both have looked back on and recognized that this is the love of God coming through her to me at that time when I needed it more than I ever really realized. And I just remember as we watched this, we like documentaries. So there's this one that she wanted to watch, and it happened to be, she has a passion for anti-sex trafficking. And so it was this documentary about this. And one of the things that it was a faith-based documentary. And one of the things that they had at the bottom was the Ephesians 6:10-20, talking about the armor of God. And it was on the bottom of the screen the whole time through this documentary. And one of the things they kept saying, because they were implicating that this was a demonic and satanic agenda with all this trafficking, and the line they kept saying in the documentary was, even if you don't believe it, they do. And so I looked at that armor of God passage and being readied and thinking to myself that even when I wasn't necessarily following at all, I knew somewhere in the back of my mind, in the back of my heart, that if there really was a God and there really was something going on in the unseen realms, that Jesus was probably the guy. And so I remember just breaking down that evening, and I actually I went and had to dig out my Bible that my parents gave me when I was probably like 14. It's literally the Junior Adventure Bible, and I had to dust it off out of the desk drawer and dug in and read the passage. And I remember really, like, I broke down in tears and cried out, God, I do believe in who you are, and I do want to serve you. I don't know what I'm doing with my life. And that was that beginning moment of him hearing, listening, and starting moving me forward to where I am today. Which is funny because in culinary school, when I was going to church and met my first wife, and that's when God actually called me to ministry, was in culinary school. And I remember thinking, why would I do that? I'm, clearly I cook, I know how to cook, I'm in school for that. Like, why would I do that? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. And then ultimately after my divorce, that's when I full on walked away from the church and joined the band at that time. And so it's been coming all the way back to where we are now.
How many years was that in between?
I was 20 years.
Okay.
20 year, easily a 20-year wander in my own personal desert. And with that, because I wasn't grounded, the substance abuse patterns just continued from one thing or another. At one point, my wife and I found ourselves in a deep pit and needed to get out of as well. Long story short, I had messed up my back and knee within a year of each other. This is back before they were regulating pain meds, and they were handing out, opiates like Tic Tacs.
Every appointment you went to, they wanted to give you.
Did you need a refill? Or,
Yeah.
And so then the two of us just found ourselves in this pit of like, what are we doing? And so, yeah, it was interesting.
So how did you get out? How did you get out of that pit to the point to where you felt stable, though you were ready to move on with your life, and that you'd be able to get to that point that God had been working on you for 20 years?
At that time, this wasn't a faith measure. It was a personal effort, really is how that worked. At that time, there was it wasn't new, but it was technology made it advance. And so they've been able to figure out how to extract THC from the actual plant fiber and create hash oils,
Right.
which are like super high concentrated. And so we moved into smoking like extremely intense, like 80 to 90% THC oil. And that's how we got away from opiates. But now we've found ourselves deeper in a pit of smoking still.
One addiction to the other.
We just transferred one to the other. And it wasn't until actually returning to Christ to finding sobriety. Like,
returning to Christ. Let's go on that journey.
Yeah.
How did you get back to that point to where you realized that you wouldn't be able to do it by yourself?
Again, that was the COVID story that I just found myself in that place. And so with that,
so when you did the COVID story and you were crying and she breaks down and she said, what's wrong with you?
Yeah.
And then you pull your Bible out.
Yeah.
That was the conversion point to where you began to walk away.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
I didn't make the connection. I thought they were happening simultaneously.
No. As I was coming out of that, that's when that moment finally happens that I move into where I am today. And that was just a lot of reading. I reached out to my brother. Again, both my brothers did walk away from the church in their young years, and so I followed suit with them.
Mhm.
ultimately both of them have returned to Christ and raised their families and all that. And so I remember reaching out. I've got two older brothers. The one of them is only 2 years older than me. So he and I have, like,
Mm.
we've always known our lives have always had each other in them as far as our recollection goes, right? So we're just people used to think we were twins when we were younger. It was funny. So I just reached out to him one day and was like, "Hey, this is where I'm at and what I'm going through." He was one of those people that was when I was, trying to get off meth. He's an amazing man, a great sounding board. And so it's just one of those things where I reached out to him and it's like, "Hey, I'm getting back into the word and I don't know where to start." So to he's like, "Okay, start with John." Like that was kind of like his direction. Start with John, work through the Gospels. And I kept asking him questions as I'm reading. Like, what does this mean? What does Jesus say when he says this? And why would he call the woman a dog? And he's like, it gets to a point where he's like, "Hey, you're asking some real deep questions now. Stuff I don't feel capable of answering." So he introduced me to his pastor, Craig Laughlin, up in Marysville at Generations Church. So
Yeah.
that was the beginning of me really seeking out. So Craig and I got together when they first opened restaurants again.
Hmm.
He and I got together and had lunch, and what was supposed to be an hour meeting turned into a 4-hour conversation.
Wow.
And I remember saying, one of the things when I really reached back into the Word and started reading again was that there was that tap on my shoulder one day where the Lord said, "Remember when I called you to ministry in culinary school? Yeah, I was serious about that. I still want you to do that." And that was a big mind blow. Like, what you want me to what? And so I remember saying to Craig, "I don't know what being a pastor is, but I think I'm supposed to do that." And so that was kind of 6 months or so of viewing their services online through YouTube, and just really doing church in our living room.
Okay.
And so Lori's conversion story is me reading through scripture and telling her about it all the time. And then one day she's like, "I want to read the Bible." And
Mm.
I'm starting John, I'm in Matthew. You
Just
can,
repeat the process.
and that's when I was like, "Oh, that's different." The fact that she wants her own, like we have one in the house, you can read it. And she's like, "No, no, I want mine."
Yeah.
And her story is more like we laughed. Like, and I got this is from, I think Eugene Peterson said it. The message, as far as some of us have the Damascus Road conversions and some of us have the Emmaus Road conversions. Hers was an Emmaus Road.
Emmaus
As
Road, yeah.
she first read through the Sermon on the Mount, she was like, "I never knew that this is who Jesus was." And so that was kind of how the two of us start moving forward as a couple in faith. And then as I'm expressing these things where I think I'm supposed to be a pastor, and she's like, "I don't know what that means. I don't even know what it means to be a pastor's wife." I think we're still searching that for both of us at times. But that was just through that process. And then at one point, Craig was really, really like, "Hey, you guys should find a home church. I appreciate that you're watching online. I love that you're asking questions, but you need a faith community to be a part of." And then one day he was like, "I don't know why I've never said this to you before. You should go check out Kent Hillside. They're not far from you." And so I remember sitting with Pastor Ev and saying the same thing.
Hmm.
I think I'm supposed to be a pastor, and I don't know what that means.
Well, a lot of us have been through that lifestyle. My call to ministry was about a 20-year journey as well. It wasn't drugs, stuff like that, but it was just not wanting to say yes, not wanting
Yeah,
to see. I
yeah.
told the Lord, "You got my two brothers. You don't need me. I'm happy to be a lay person. I'm happy to be a musician." Actually, I started playing in bands when I was 13 years old. And I've been playing music my whole life. But I was playing in gospel bands
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
playing
Not heavy
music
metal.
there. But that whole process, it took me many years to get to that point, answering that question as well. And one of the things that one of my mentors taught me is that God's call on you to ministry is not always to be a pastor. And sometimes if he calls you to be a pastor, it's not the pastor that you may have taught or you may have seen. He may have a different road for you, which is
Mm.
completely different, because there are hundreds of ways to be a minister, hundreds of ways to be a pastor, hundreds of ways to be a leader, which has been very, very helpful for me to get away from thinking about that traditional role and trying to ask God, what do you really want me to do?
Mm.
So we get to this point in your life now, you've made a commitment, you're trying to find a journey to see where you're going. Where are you now, and what are you doing now?
So as I'm moving through some of these spaces and working in the beverage industry, I had been removed from cooking for quite a while at that point. I was in the beverage industry working in sales. And I remember one of the guys that I was training with as a sales guy said to me something about being a chef. And I was bitter and angry about never having actually followed through and pursuing the things. I pursued my band more than cooking at that time,
Mm.
and ended up just taking a driving job to make the hours work for what I wanted to do. And I remember my buddy Larry said something about, well, you're a chef. And I was like, no, and I just kind of barked at him like, no, I'm not. And so moving into where I am now, I work for an organization called World Relief here in our Western Washington office. When I first started talking to Ev at Hillside, he says, hey, we've got this kitchen thing that we're building. They're going to need somebody to run their program. It's not my job to give you, but, talk to Mina Martelli, you might know her, and apply when they're ready to hire. And so that's what I did. And by the grace of God, here I am at World Relief. So what I am is the commercial learning kitchen coordinator, where World Relief is a refugee and immigrant services agency. And so through that, I work specifically in the resiliency department, where we are, the federal government gave us 90 days worth of funding for resettlement as people come to the country. And as an organization, we believe that it takes a lot more than 3 months to get your life together from such a disruption. And so our resiliency program goes beyond that. And so specifically in healing with trauma and working through place-based programming, we've got a community garden, a sewing studio, and our equity and sustainability internship program with immigrant refugee youth in our local Kent school districts. So that's kind of the stuff that we do as a whole as a program. I specifically am the kitchen coordinator. So this is a moment where it takes my skills as a chef and bring me into a faith-based organization to be able to work with a community that I would have never had any attachment to prior. And so it's been quite an amazing journey to get to this space. We're actually just entered our third cohort. We've actually graduated 9 students already, and some of them have already started their own businesses. So it's been a pretty amazing program to be a part of.
Yeah, it sounds amazing to me that this is where your journey has led you. When you look back on how you got here, did you ever imagine that being a chef would be being a chef with people coming from all around the world with all
No,
sorts of
not
tastes
at
and all
all.
sorts of vision, also dealing with a whole bunch of trauma, a whole bunch of religious backgrounds. And
Mhm.
now, what does it mean to be a pastor? I mean, I'll use the word minister. What does it mean to be a minister? How am I going to use my gifts? Did you ever imagine that they would be coming together in a way like this?
Never. And so, as a part of our program, as we've built the curriculum, we've also aligned our competencies for the curriculum with the American Culinary Federation, which is one of the largest networks of professional chefs here in the States. And so, they have kind of their own certification guidelines. And so, we're training people toward some of that. The redemption factor of never thinking, like I said earlier, that I was a chef or going to be a chef by title has been redeemed. And that's been an amazing place to be in. I never thought I needed that blessing, but it was something that the Lord really blessed me with, and being able to be technically called chef now. But the funny thing is, the moment that I was like, I think I can retire here, was the moment that the Lord really ripped the kitchen out of my hands and said, this is not yours. You are a steward right now.
Mhm.
But until then, I do know that I am to be a good steward over the program that's been set before me. So,
So, Jeff, now you're working with people who you grew up in California, raised in Walla Walla. You talk about the life you had and the things that you've done, mostly very American centric, Western centric. Now you're working with people who come from all over the world, completely different backgrounds, different skin colors, different
mm-hmm,
languages,
mm-hmm,
different experiences, some of them very traumatic, and they're
yeah,
recovering.
yeah.
How do you feel working in this space? Has it been challenging for you? What are some of your thoughts there?
It has been one of the single greatest challenges of my food career, because I have entered into territories of cuisines that I am completely unfamiliar with, spice palettes and ingredient lists that are like, what? So, learning how to just navigate shopping. If you go to your local grocery store, you're not going to find all the things you probably want to find if you're not from the States. And so now, just as an example, we put together a spice display for an event, and were collecting different whole spices that were coming from around the world. I had to go to like 6 different stores to ultimately find everything that I needed and still couldn't find certain ingredients. That's a reality when you think about just coming to a new country and trying to find something that's like home and how difficult that actually is. My boss tells a story about her first year working in Greece and trying to do Thanksgiving with her family and how much of a challenge it was to pull off American Thanksgiving in Greece. And that's just a reality. And so, like you said, the different backgrounds that come into that kitchen have also, so beyond just challenging me as a chef and ingredients and all those things, has now challenged me with my understandings of cultural norms and behaviors and respect levels and just little things. I'm the person that's going to rub your shoulder and say, how you doing? And get a hold of you and give you a high five or whatever. I have found out that culturally, like I went to shake an Afghan lady's hands and she froze. And my boss pulled me aside. He's like, look, men never touch women in that culture unless you're married. So just don't do that. And that was like I'm just being friendly, but that was a big thing.
On a
Yeah.
cultural intelligence journey.
Yeah, it has. And then language is, I don't speak Dari. I don't speak French. I don't speak Spanish, all those things. And so having people in that are from Morocco, that are from the Congo, that are from Afghanistan, like you have these moments where you have to really humble yourself and like, how do we move forward to communicate on a level where we can all understand? That has been another great challenge of my life, but it's opened doors to me with relationships with people that now I call friends that have graduated from my program to challenge me as a person, like preconceived and in-rooted things you just didn't know were there that you hold toward other cultures or other people. And to really check those moments, to really search your heart and go, well, where's that from? And why would I have that attitude? And is it something that can be dismantled right now? And pretty much every time, yes, it is something that can be dismantled because the reality is that we stop. And I think the biggest thing that has hit me over the last few years is the reality of Imago Dei, the reality of being image bearers of God, and the reality of that, yes, when we're adopted into the family, we are called sons and daughters, but we are built in with inherent dignity of God. And so that has transcended into my life in a way that I never thought would have happened 5 years ago, almost 4 years at World Relief. And that has been probably one of the deepest things that has affected me is to really look into, as Jesus said, the windows of the soul and understand that that's a person that was made and formulated and known before they ever took their first breath. And that's the God that knows me. And so that's a really cool thing to step into a space where it's like, you have changed me in such a way that even the quote unquote most vilest of act of humans, I still stop and I say that person needs Jesus more ever than ever.
Yeah, that's powerful coming to that point of realizing the image of God in all people.
Yeah.
We live in pretty tumultuous days today, and a lot of things are going on in this country and around the world. So when you hear some of the things being said about immigrants and about people who are different, how does that make you feel? Or what comes to your mind as a believer in Christ who is now working in this space with people whose lives you see them being transformed? And they're not all Christian. Some of them are Muslims, some of them are Hindu, some of them are all faiths, some of them may be no faith. How are you making that journey, and how do you put those two things together with what you might hear, with what you're actually seeing, and the work that you're doing, and how it's transforming lives?
I focus on the task at hand in front of me and really letting God work through me. As an organization, we don't proselytize, but we're not hiding our faith either. Everybody that comes through our doors knows that we're a Christian organization. I am honest with every one of my students. I'm a minister in this church. Our partnership with where the kitchen is built is at Hillside Church. It is a space where I'm open with who I am and what I'm doing, which does allow to enter into some wonderful conversations engaged from student inquiry. The challenge has been to operate respectfully, but also operate in truth and not to shy away from that.
As we turn the corner to come home on this topic, I really appreciate you sharing with us and sharing your story and sharing your journey.
Thanks for having me.
Two questions to bring it home. The first one is, if you had to look into the future, where do you see yourself and Laurie in the next 5, 10 years?
As we've navigated through what it means to be called into ministry and what that looks like. The Lord has really opened our eyes into different avenues. I came into this with a preconceived notion of what a pastor is and does, and that was just from growing up and that view. It hasn't completely been dismantled. That is something that's still, I've prayed diligently, and both Lori and I have, the people around me, about what is it that you want from my life, Lord, and where is it you want to take me? It really was over this last year that it really has set in, that I am still building that tool belt and toolbox, still really leaning into where he's taking me. He has called us to some form of international service that we felt in the past, but he's also redefined what that also means in the roles that my wife, she's not here anymore. She was unfortunately laid off earlier this year with a third of our organization after federal fundings were cut. But what it means to work in international communities, and that really, as you and I have talked at one point in time too, the reality of the mission field in America is very ripe and needed to have people in it. Over this last year, as I've been praying about where is it, it really settled in this last year that the Lord is calling me to shepherding a flock, and that there is a place somewhere out there that he has for Lori and I to be that senior role. And so now knowing that, okay, this is where you're taking me, and this is not where I thought this was going. And what does that mean in all these other things you've told me? So there's still some stuff that we're navigating through and praying through. I know the one thing that my boss asked me the other day, what is Jesus telling you right now? And it is to be a good steward over the things I have given you. Master this, and we will move forward.
Right now.
That's a bit.
Yeah. One of my friends who became a missionary, I remember her saying this to me. Everything that we go through in life, in our walk with Christ, is boot camp for what he is preparing us for in the future.
Yeah.
But you got to go through boot camp before you can move on to being out in the field.
Mm-hmm.
So you're learning a lot, and I appreciate your honesty about that as well. And seeing you grow, and seeing you minister, and seeing you relate to people has been encouraging to watch your journey and to watch Lori's journey as well.
Mm-hmm.
So as we close out this morning now, what are 3 things that you would like our audience to take away from this conversation, or 3 things that you would like to say to the person who may be saying, I thought my life was going in this direction, I went this way, and now I'm coming back this way, but I'm still not sure. How do I get to that point to where I feel like I'm walking in the light that I've been given towards something that is purposeful?
As I thought about that question, one of the things that I would please hear, if you have a prodigal in your life, don't stop praying. Don't stop praying. Never know when the Lord will tap that person on the shoulder again. I sit here as a prodigal knowing for a fact that I had parents and grandparents and uncles and aunts and brothers and sisters, people diligently praying over my life. That's my brother and I love to spread that message to folks. Like, don't stop praying, because you don't know when that will happen. That is one thing I wanted to make sure people knew to walk away with this. Another one was that if you are in that place of call to ministry or where the Lord's leading you, be open. Don't let it be a rigid set of what you think it's supposed to be, because the moment you grasp onto those things, the Lord's really good at dismantling those from your hands. So be open to the fact that he has a journey for you. The will of God is not a one single dot, not a one single point for you. It may be a series of dots and points that he's going to work you through. And that is what you just said about building that tool belt and your experiences. And so be open to the fact that where you think you're supposed to be might not be where you're supposed to be. Now, discerning that's a whole different thing, and that comes with a lot of prayer and listening. But that would be like, I guess my third thing is find time every day for the Lord. Sometimes easier said than done. But I think one of the things that I have said to my son many times is that if you can spend an hour in the morning focusing and digging into devotional and prayer, that it grounds you in such a way, not only for the day, but just as a practice in life. And there's a huge benefit that comes from that. There are studies that show us the benefits of just reading scripture alone. Find time every day. And it doesn't have to be the morning. That just is my sweet spot, because I love coffee and praying in the morning and being alone. but find that space if it's in the evening, if it's the middle of the day, because the reality is that when we don't, it can derail so fast. And so having a foundation of spending time alone with God. I mean, my dad said this to me one time in reference to reading through specifically, but also Luke. You see repeatedly that Jesus steps aside to be alone in prayer. If the Son of God needed that, how much more then do we? And that's a reality. You've got to spend time alone with Jesus.
Thank you, Jeff. That's a great point to end on. If we call ourselves people of faith,
Mm-hmm.
we call ourselves followers of Christ, then we've got to spend time becoming acquainted, familiar.
Yeah. Yeah.
We got to find our time becoming students of his word. What does the word actually say and how is it speaking to us? And time in prayer, following the model that he gave us. I've been focusing really on this topic called intentional discipleship. And I'm working on some materials in that way, right? Being intentional about our faith journey. Because like you said, if we're not intentional, it can so easily become derailed. And not because we intend to do that,
Mm-hmm.
but it's because life always has something that's going to come in there before,
Yeah.
right? There's always going to be something to do, always going to be some other thing to say, well, I can pray later, I can read later, I can study later. But like you said, when you say, I'm going to get up in the morning and spend this hour doing this, then that intention helps you to get to that point to where it becomes a habit.
Yeah.
And also your point about trying to put God in a box.
Yeah.
He can lead us in many ways. And sure, we have mentors and we have people around us that we look at and we say, we see God working in their life, and that's good. However, God can work in your life, but your picture may look different to theirs.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And, when we first started out, we thought we had this one picture, and now it's turning out to be this different picture.
Very
But it's the same of God, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I really appreciate you, and I appreciate the conversation that we've had, and for you taking the time here to come and share. And I know that this time will touch other people. Other people are going to listen to it, and it's going to relate to them and help them in their journey. And I wish you all the best in your journey and your and Laurie's journey. Anything else you want to say before we go?
I was just, as I was thinking about it, something that literally happened just this week, the power of prayer. I love the guys that I played music with, like brothers. We spent a decade of our lives together, and I have diligently been praying over them. I've told them all, I've shared the gospel with them all, and I've said to them collectively and individually, I want you in eternity with me. All three of them are currently pursuing Christ.
Amen.
And
Yeah.
it's been one of the greatest blessings. I just talked to my bass player, and he's like, I'm going to Mass for the first time in 20-something years. And when I talked to him afterwards, he's like, it was great. The pastor that helped me through hospice with my mom has invited me to his church. I'm going there next week. And we're going to start an online Bible study together. I never thought I'd be in a place where my best friends would be.
God hears and answers our prayers, and he heard your heart, and he is answering your prayer. So I just want to take a minute right now and just say, Lord, thank you for Jeff's consistency in praying for his friends, and thank you for how you have brought them to you. You know where they are right now. Reach them, continue to grow in their lives, and continue to grow in their journey together. And maybe this can be the beginning of a new journey for them together again. And the people who may be listening to this podcast episode right now and who are wondering, should I give up or should I keep praying, that they would keep praying. And if there are those who are wondering about how you're going to use them in their lives, in Jesus' name, amen.
Man.
Thank you, my friend.
Thanks, brother.
Have a great day.